Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of not rock or metal. We're going to be checking out a song from Aphex Twin, which, if I remember correctly from past looks at their work, we're looking at some electronic music today. So let's dive in and see what they're bringing to the table with the track Rhubarb. Very nice, warm, sort of blurry, distant atmosphere to start with. I really like that bass hit that comes in at the end of the phrase. So we've introduced a lower instrument to harmonize with it. Alright, we're stacking on the layers quick now. It still sounds very, you know what it sounds like? It sounds like you're listening to it underwater. Or at least it sounds like I'm listening to it underwater. We have a shimmering kind of sound back there now. And that low end bassiness that I liked at the end of the line is now present, has 3 notes now. Ooh. A slight variation on the idea rhythmically. The interesting thing is too is that we're in 9/4, I think. All right, that's it. Is that it? Yeah, there we go. There's some cool things happening in here, but I think the interesting thing is more so than I think any other song we've talked about when I, dig into a song's structure or even atmosphere. I don't think we've heard anything quite like this. It is literally not even just a single section, a single melodic idea, a single bar repeated hundreds of times. Adding ideas onto it, of course, it's not completely static, but the underlying foundational elements don't really change. We have that small variation at the end. However, listening to the fade out reminded me of the opening. And I wonder if it wasn't necessarily a variation of the idea that we heard there in the final minute. It was actually just a return to the simplicity of the intro that I had forgotten about, given the complexity we had been listening to for a couple of minutes at that point. And I think that's the truth right there. Because once the violin came in and began to add quarter notes to the idea and actually had some movement other than just these underlying swells, I think I forgot that the underlying swells were the foundation. So when we returned to it, it felt like a new idea, even though it's actually just going back to where we came from. And so, casually, I have a very different relationship to this than critically. And I think we're going to start on the critical end of the spectrum first. Just because I want to be a bit more positive before diving into the fact I kind of didn't enjoy it, which is going to be completely on me. But, so what are the cool things it's doing? First of all, it is utilizing a single idea and keeping it, at least for the most part, this is a subjective thing, but I'd say at least for the most part, keeping it interesting for 8 minutes almost. I would have loved to have known about this song about a year ago, maybe a little less than a year ago. When I was doing, it was one of our earlier composition jam themes, and it was write a single idea and have it present through the entire track. You can do whatever you want on top of that. You can make whatever melodies, you can have it change through sections, but this underlying idea needs to be present in every part of the song. And I would have loved to have heard this because I think it's a really interesting take on the idea. Primarily because it chooses the pure simplicity in the task. It intentionally doesn't change. It goes against everything I typically enjoy in music. It goes against how I typically compose music. I would never make something like this because I would believe people would find it boring, because I, as we'll get into a bit when we get into some of my more subjective feelings about this song, do find it boring in some places. There's some places where I'm just like, all right, let's move on. Let's get to the next idea. And it's just, this would have been really great inspiration for me to try to really lean into this idea, because I put quite a bit of variety in my submission for this theme on top of the repetition, and that's just how I typically compose. I like things to be moving. So, I have a lot of respect and admiration for somebody who says, I don't care what people think of this, I'm going to make this vibe. We're going to explore it thoroughly. We're going to explore it a little slowly, but we're going to do it on my time. We're going to do it my way. And, just a lot of respect for that. An 8-minute song that really doesn't change a lot. There's just a lot of faith in that, I think. Or another word would be confidence. A lot of confidence in the work itself. And I don't think that confidence is misplaced either. I think the song is very evocative emotionally. I'm not quite sure what it's going for. It's a complex emotion. And I don't know that's something I've spoken about looking at previous Aphex Twins work before. But this is a really interesting emotion that they're digging into. I find it to be warm and pensive and hopeful and melancholic and just a lot of things. It's like being in summer for all that's worth. The brightness and joys that the sun typically brings out in people, but also realizing that you're at the halfway point of the year. This year's half over, at least to me, time seems to be flying in this age. As a teenager, years took forever. As a 20-something, I'd say about the same. As a 30-something, the years just, I can't seem to make them stop anymore. So the sudden realization that you felt like the year just began and we're already halfway through, and the mixed emotions of that. We're getting close to winter. At least for me, winter is my favorite season. We're getting out of the warmer stuff, getting into the cooler stuff. I enjoy, winter fashion more. There's just a lot of things I enjoy about the latter half of the year. So, yeah, we're getting back to that. We're getting close to that. Holiday season's coming back. Halloween's coming. But then there's also the realization that, 6 months have passed. Where did that go? And you look back at the 6 months and, you know, things are changing. Things are moving fast. Time's progressing. It feels like you're losing track of it. You're losing hold of all of that. And that's kind of what this feels like to me. It's that midpoint of the year where it's supposed to be warm and bright and cheery, but there's also a melancholy to it. At least for me, just because it seems to sneak up on me every year. I still have a hard time believing we're in 2022. I feel like the 2020s just started as a whole. I don't know how we're here already. Um, and that, I mean, it seems to capture all this. I don't know how I get this vibe out of it, but it is. Or I should say I mean, that's what I get. It's huge mixture. There's joy, there's happiness, there's pensiveness, there's longing for the past, there's melancholy, there's a bit of a lost to it. Some of that comes from the cyclical nature. It feels like it's just kind of swirling in a single place, kind of losing track of things. It it's just a lot of things, and I think it's fantastic that it can achieve all of that with very minimal work. However, they're going quite a bit in that minimal work direction by maximizing the minimality of it. I'm just on a hmm, just making up all sorts of words today. Ah, minimalizing the maximality of it. There is a lot of stuff happening when not a lot of stuff is happening at all. It takes a while to get there, but there's a point where we begin to add multiple layers. It seems every bar we're getting a new one. I mentioned that the lower end bassy note that we really only got at the end of the idea. We get two more strikes of those. We get them on the downbeat of 1, the downbeat of 5, and then the downbeat of 8, I think it is. Because this is a 9/4 track, and we'll get into that later. And then the violin part, we end up getting a lower end harmony off of that. That violin part also, after the harmony comes in, it takes on a new melody line with a little bit more movement to it. There's shimmering sounds that come in, and it's not like a cymbal. It's like a synth sound that just feels shimmery. I don't know a better way to describe that. There's a bit of a reverb to it, maybe a little bit of volume movement. So it kind of sounds like it's phasing in and out. But it also just has this really bright timbre to it. And I think all those come together that it feels shimmery, almost like like chimes. Like you run your hand across some chimes and you get the shimmery sound of all of them coming together. Except this is a synth and it's not a set of chimes. Um, and there's also some stuff that just little atmospheric ideas that are included, slowly included throughout the song until we end up with this very wide, larger production. And then, of course, we begin to pare it back so that we can return back to that baseline foundation. But looking at all the little things that go into this, it's really impressive how it never really changes. No matter how many things we add, how many different ways we begin to layer it, it never really changes into something else. We even completely removed the melody line and replaced it with something with more notes to it and end up with the same. And kind of going with my vibe of time, where this kind of reminds me of sitting in a very specific place in time, which is the middle of events. I likened it to summer being in the middle of the year, but you could also just be the middle, being in the middle of a decade or being in the middle of a week and not knowing where, Sunday through Tuesday went, that kind of vibe. That the whole idea of just understanding there's a lot ahead of you, but also wondering just how you came to be where you're at as fast as you did. like I said, the hopeful brightness of the future, and also a longing or looking back at the past. And in that way, the song sort of works thematically. It's cyclical. The more things change, the more they stay the same, as the old adage goes. And I think that's applicable also to the feelings of time. So, I don't know if this is necessarily what they're going for. I don't know how rhubarb works into this reading of it, but it's certainly how I feel regarding the song, and I think it lines up rather well. Um, there was one more thing I wanted to talk about before we got to the time signature. I can't remember what it is. We're going to dive into the time signature then, and if I remember, we'll circle back to it. So yeah, this is a 9/4. And it's interesting because I didn't really pick up on the fact it was an odd time signature until we were halfway through the song. And that's unusual for me, especially for 9/8. That's not a standard time signature. It's easy for maybe a 3/4 or a 4/4 or a 6/8 to kind of slip by me. They're more standard. They show up in a lot of music. They feel less out of place. 9/4 is an oddity. But it's an oddity that he made feel very natural. And that's the trick. I tend to pick up on time signatures when they feel unnatural, and one way to do that is to put them next to each other. If you've had me in 4/4 from the beginning and we shift to 3/4, it's going to feel like we've lost something, and that's going to bring my attention to it. And basically what he did here was just not allow any attention to be placed on it. And I think the way that they went about doing that is by not ever putting any focus on beat 9. So when we listen to this, the phrasing is divvied up into two sides. We have our first grouping of 4 and our second grouping of 5. And it's possible that the way it's written on paper is an alternating 4/4 and 5/4, but I just think having a 9/4 works better because the phrase does feel like a 9-beat phrase overall, and it would increase readability for anybody who would be, a musician. Obviously, in this case, Aphex Twin writes the music and performs it. Maybe doesn't. I don't know how electronic music works in this case. Either way, though, this isn't the idea of a composer putting his thoughts down on paper and handing it to somebody else to replicate, where they have to parse through what the composer intends. But in that situation, the 9/4 would make more sense because it portrays what the composer is really trying to get through here, which is that these ideas are single bars. They're they're actually, ooh, these ideas are isolated. None of them bleed over into each other. There's always a harsh break from beat 9 to beat 1. And that's not super harsh. I'm not saying like there's a hard cutoff, but the ideas don't lean into the next ones. It's more of a repetition. We have this 9-beat block, then we have the next 9-beat block. And they build off of each other, but they don't interact with each other. There's no point where a note really bleeds from beat 9 into beat 1. There is a couple of notes that are static. There's a higher pitched synth tone that's just kind of held. It never really ends, and I don't remember when it started. As far as I know, when I noticed it, it was just kind of there. It's been there for a while. I didn't notice it come in. And honestly, I don't remember when it ended either. Man, that's kind of cool. But yeah, so I think that's one of the only times that we actually have a note that is held from beat 9 into the next beat 1, and that's just because it never changes anyways. It's just a constant. And in that way, going back to my idea of time, these could be seen as moments of time, actions, events. Even in my idea of years, these could be individual years. This could even tell the story of somebody from their birth to their death, with each resulting year building on what had come prior to it, and in the final years, kind of having things removed as someone gets into their old age and maybe they're able to do less or quality of life drops. Maybe they just don't have the energy they used to until eventually it fades out gracefully. Again, I don't know if that was the intended idea, but this whole concept of time is something that just screams out to me. Now, going back to the 9, though, I want to focus back on. want to focus back on this though, is the idea of the extra, right? And like I said, I think the way that this slipped by my radar for so long is that it's not emphasized. Yeah, this is where we were at. So we had two groups, the 4 beat and the 5 beat. And they're both very similar. If we look at them as, instead of 4 and 5, we look at them as 4, 4, 4, 1. In which case, the two 4s have very similar vibes to them. We do eventually hear a little bit of differentiation rhythmically in them, like when the bassier tone comes out, and we have the expansion of that idea. We have it on beat 1, and then on beat 5, which is beat 1 of the second grouping of 4, and then on 8, which is the last beat of the second grouping of 4. So it's a small variation. Instead of having one hit, we have two hits. But the thing is, throughout the entire track, we have the 4, the 4, and the 1. And I don't think anything ever happens on the 1. There's fade outs into the 1, or fade outs across the 1, or notes held across the 1, but nothing comes in to emphasize the 1. Nothing is ever hit on the 1. Notes bleed into it, but nothing begins there. And it really de-emphasizes it. And it wasn't until I noticed that the notes that were being held across it felt just a little too long that I had to look into the time signature itself, and I realized, oh, we got an extra beat here. Why do we have an extra beat, though? I don't know. It could just be that Aphex Twin really likes the phrasing of it. That to end the bar a beat early seems premature, just in the idea of how the song sounds in his head. While he's humming this core melody, he hums this extra beat, this fade out across that 9th beat. But it could be that there's a very intentional reason. Maybe 9 has a specific meaning to this song, or maybe the idea of having a little bit extra ties into some of the themes they were hoping to achieve in here. It doesn't really work with my interpretation or reading, though. I don't see how having the extra beat works with the idea of being in the middle, or being between events, and kind of realizing what's ahead and being joyous about that, while also looking towards the past and kind of wondering how we got here. The 9 doesn't quite fit there. I can kind of dig in a little bit and say that the 4 and the 5 just means that the future has more to it. If the 4 would be the past, and then we have the break where we are, and then the 5 is the future, that there's a little bit of indeterminacy about it. It should be 4. We're expecting another 4, but we're getting 5. But I feel like that's stretching the reading just a hair bit. But it is interesting that at least found a way to disguise 9 as 8 for so long. And I'm sure some people might not ever really realize it. It flows. It has a real nice natural element to it that doesn't draw attention to it. It never really felt out of place until I don't even know what set me off on it. Like I said, just one of the notes that were held over, I was like, wait a second, that's too long. And I don't even know why I thought that. I don't know what it was about it. I honestly can't remember why I paid attention to the time signature. I just did at one point. And it's possible that it wasn't that way the whole song, but given the simplicity and minimalistic nature of the composition, I'm going to wager it was. Um, I think that's going to be it then. It's a bit of a shorter one, but it's also a track with a single idea. So there's only so much I can read into it and explain. But, talking about, we don't even need to go into the subjective manner. I mean, longtime viewers, you guys know what's up. It's a long track, it's very repetitive. If you get into it, I think you really allow the song to wash over you. Critically, I don't really have that affordance to emotionally engage with music in that manner because I'm, hyper focused on the minutia, trying to see how everything works so I can do these analyses. Maybe if I listen to this casually, just put the headphones on, sit in the corner, turn the lights out, vibe with it, I might really enjoy it, but it's just a bit slow paced for me. And I think that's going to be true even on a casual listen. I appreciate what it's going for artistically, and like I said, just a lot of confidence in the idea as well. But normally, I tend to enjoy music that has a little bit more momentum to it. But, like I said, it would not have achieved the same thing. You don't get that same story being told by having constant momentum in tracks. So, by no means am I saying that it should be changed in any way. I really enjoy what it's doing. It's just not a casual listen for me. It's something I enjoy artistically. All right, yeah, we didn't really need a whole section for that. Those are my thoughts on Aphex Twins' Rhubarb. This is where you guys come in. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you thought of this track. If there's anything that stood out to you, anything that you want to add on to my analysis of it, just let me know. Hit me up in the comments. Tell me what's on your minds. Above the comment section is a description box, and there's a link for Linktree. Take you to this menu right here. It has everything related to the channel. You can pick up some merch, join the Patreon, and vote on future themes and songs. Submit your special selections. Join the Discord. Follow me on Twitter. Just a bunch of stuff in there. Go ahead and check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. We have one more video that came out just 3 minutes ago, which is an odd thing to say. Usually these videos run into like 45, 50, 60 minutes long. Go ahead and check that out. It's a special selection. I believe we're looking at another Striper track today. So if you enjoyed that one from Thursday, I think it was, dig in here and we'll hear some more heavy metal, I think is the genre. Pretty excited about it. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. We'll look at another not rock or metal track and another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.